I'm not as prepared as Bruce. I don't write everything out. But I've got about 4 points that I'm going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about, probably with the pictures. The other person to blame for me becoming involved with the hysterical society, as I called it in high school, was Dr. Donald McKay. Microphone? Okay. Dr. Donald McKay got me involved in a lot of things. But this evening, this grew out of a really interesting opportunity that came my way. And it was a discussion I had with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Mackison, who is also known to me as the poster boy. He brings in posters. So he came into my store on one of his regular deliveries, and we started talking about different things, and I innocently commented on something that he hadn't heard about. My dad once had a small project. He called it his little black book. And it's not the type of black book you think it is. He started, it's interesting, he started keeping track of the businesses that opened and closed on Hurontario Street from the time we opened in June 6th, 1969. He stopped making records on our 25th anniversary, and there were over 400 entries. So businesses had opened, businesses had closed in 25 years. So it was quite interesting. My mom and dad came to town. My dad came as the general manager at Kaufman Furniture. And by 1967, he was looking for a new challenge. He'd always wanted to start his own business. So he bought a building. Then he decided what he was going to put in it. I love the way my parents worked. So if we talk about our building, I thought what I would do, I've got some wonderful photographs, but I thought I would talk first and then we can just sort of work our way through the photographs. We are a business in what's known as the third block, which is like the hinterland. The first block was the big block. The second block was the next best block because that had the town hall. And then the third, so anything south of third was sort of considered to be way down, and we're almost at fourth, so it's quite interesting. My parents bought a church, and it was really interesting when I first came back to town after university and working out west. I went to a BIA meeting, and it ended up taking us to a town hall meeting where there was a lot of complaints that there was somebody who wanted to open a church on the main street of Collingwood. They bought a building and they wanted to put a church in it. And you can't do that. And so I'm sitting there and sitting there and sitting. Finally I stuck my hand up and they said, what? I said, well, my dad bought the Christian Reformed Church. And next door to us, right on the corner, was the Church of the Nazarene. So churches have existed on our main street in the past. And they all just sort of looked at me. It was kind of like that phrase, gobsmacked. Like, what do you mean there were churches on the main street? Well, there were. So it's kind of interesting. The building that my parents bought was originally built as what was known, purpose-built for the Ditson Bakery. It became a co-op for about 6 or 7 years. It became a Christian Reformed Church, and then it became our business, which is Crow's Nest Books and Gifts and Skelton Galleries. That's one building on our main street. Now this evening, I have to say a very special thank you to Kathy DeRuiter, who's with the Planning and Building Department here in Collingwood. Her father, Jack Saunders, who was also the owner of Saunders Books and Stationery down the street from us in the good first block. Early in his career was also a photographer. And through Bruce and through Kathy, we started looking at old photos that came from the Saunders Historical Family Archives, and that's a lot of what I have on the screen, including the one you're looking at now. It's quite interesting to look at our town. She's also, we have her with us because we've got Planning and Building Department stuff here. So she's kind of on loan to us. There are 3 wonderful sheets at 3 different periods, starting in 69 through 81. Of the main street of Collingwood, and it lists basically the businesses that were there. So I encourage you when we're finished to come up and take a look and work your way up and down. We've set them up so you can go on either side of the table. They're east and west side of the streets. Now around on this side, shortly after my parents bought the building, a few people in town on the main street thought it'd be a great idea to form a BIA. The BIA is now it's celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And its first big job was to renovate the street. But they also, through working with the town, we have some wonderful pictures here that are the east and the west side of the street that were drawn by Peter Stokes. It was a project, and it shows you buildings that were in existence along the street. Guess what? Some are still there, and a lot of them are gone. So it's interesting to come up and walk along. I think we start, this is the north end here, and we go around to the south end of the street. So we go from first to fourth, sorry. My block. It's interesting. So now, I'd like to tell you, when my parents bought a church, I could stand on the front porch of the church and look across at Westlake's garage. If I looked to the right of Westlake's garage was the LCBO. My dad told me to call it the Licorice Control Board of Ontario. To our immediate right on our side of the street was Lions Cleaners. And shortly after we opened, to our left, the Church of the Nazarene became the Hen and Chickens. Kitty corner across Hurontario Street from us to the southwest corner of 4th and Hurontario was a beautiful old home. It was a lawyer's office. It was Norman Rule. And then on the corner opposite that, so the southeast corner, was Cy Sunoco Station. Now, if I stand on my front porch now, Lions is gone. The only thing that's kind of still there is across the street, we still have a Max that has gas pumps. That's about as close as we come. Licorice Control Board's gone, Cy Sunoco's gone, Hen and Chickens is gone. The whole building that was Norman Rule's house is gone, but I was told on the way in, his front porch is somewhere in town. So things did get moved from there. But in our time, it's amazing what has come in and out along the main street as far as businesses. So I'd like to throw out a few names. Anybody here remember Potts Dairy? Okay. Walker's Store. Nettleton's? Okay. Burgess Textiles. People's. Krogman's. The Little Pastry Shop. We all love the little pastry shops. How about Monroe's? Okay. The Regent Theatre. Okay. Johnson's Hardware. We used to have hardware stores on the main street. La Belle Rue. Ah, not a hand. That was Norman Rule's house. It turned into a ladies' wear shop that was run by Rose Jacks and a couple of friends, and then in behind the garage they converted and made it into the gingerbread house, which was the children's shop. So next door was the Church of the Nazarene. There was Bryden's Electronics. How about Copper Kettle? Very short-lived kitchen shop on Main Street. How about the Hiawatha? Yay, we all went to the Hiawatha, okay. Dominion Stores. They were in a couple places on the Main Street. How about Stouties? Anybody who rode a bike or skated from Stoutenburg Sports Shop? So it's kind of interesting. CKCB. Okay, that was our radio station. So what I would like to say, when we opened in 1969, stores were open Monday to Saturday. Often they were closed on Wednesday afternoons. Open Friday nights till 9. That was the only night of the week they were open. And that was the time a lot of people came to town. They would come into town to have dinner, do their shopping, and go home. That was the shopping night. So a lot of families came into town or would go have dinner and go to the theater, the movie theater. It was a very different, I'm one of what's called the town's centennial babies. I was born in 1958. And so this year I will be 59, the town will be 159. Our country will be 150. But what's interesting, we have a picture or two of the Centennial Parade for the town in the slides I will be showing you. The thing that's most interesting, some of the buildings have come down naturally, some have been renovated so much you wouldn't even recognize them today, and some of them look exactly the same. But the community that I grew up in was a small town. It still is a small town, but it's a different small town. Our main street used to have everything you needed. It had ladies' wear shops, men's wear shops, shoe shops, food stores, butchers, stationery. I'm trying to think of all the practical things that now we're spread out about, and they're not on the main street. If you really walk and look at the main street of Collingwood, my dad had a term, he called it the thing and it stores. We have a lot of decorators, shops, and he used to laugh and he'd say, you can sell things you can sell it, well, anything to anybody, but you take it home and you wonder, why did I buy that? And it's not even that it's a knick-knack, but it was a thing, it's cute, it's trendy, it's the right color, it's whatever, and it doesn't last long. It's not an heirloom in your household. But our main street has really changed. We have evolved with a lot of restaurants, but we don't have a lot of the clothing stores. We don't have a children's store on the main street anymore. It's a challenge. The local BIA are trying to sort of see what the gaps are. But also, shopping in Collingwood used to be that 3 blocks. We now have the Western Node, we now have all of First Street. Now, would it surprise you to know that I don't think we had a McDonald's until I was in high school? So we did not have our fast food alley, and we always said, oh, we'll never be like Bayfield Street. Well, guess what? First Street's just like Bayfield Street. It's 5 lanes wide. We have a turning lane in the middle, and all of our fast food things are all along there. The one thing that both the town fathers with the BIA's very insistent urging is to keep the financial institutions downtown. So our banks are downtown. And that's one of those anchors that have helped to keep the main street as vibrant as it is. We used to have a car dealer on the main street. Lockhart's used to be on the main street. We used to have a bowling alley on the main street. Good fish and Gibson's Fish and Chips. I mean, we had so many different types of restaurants. And actually, considering the size of our community, we were quite ethnically diverse in what we had. We've gone on further, but it really is interesting to see how, in order to get better, so I'm thinking of our new movie theater out here at the corner on First and High. Rather than retrofitting a theater, we've got a multiplex. It's interesting because you hear a lot of people sort of saying, I'd love to know the history of some of the buildings. So our building, as I say, has had basically 4 different uses in its time. Every building on the main street has had at least 4, if not more than that. Very few are in their original purpose, except perhaps the town hall. Some of the banks are still in the downtown, but they may not be in their original buildings. They've moved around. The demand for parking has become so great that we've come to believe that we need to park in front of a place in order to go into it. It's quite an interesting approach because that then affects winter.
Always pay for it too.
And pay for it, yes. Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's I mean, our downtown used to have, on the back half on St. Maria, we used to have our fire department downtown. So it's really interesting to see what has happened and what might come back. I don't know if you have any ideas of what you think we need downtown, but I know that we'd love to hear them because I'm currently sitting on the BIA board and we look and we say, good thing is it's a low occupancy. We don't have a lot of vacancies the way a lot of communities do. But we have an interesting mix of offices, financial institutions, restaurants, and stores. But we don't have the breadth that we used to. Our main street has suffered some very major fires through the years. And those fires often were like old homes. You went downtown when you heard the fire rails. The Arlington burned down. Walker's, right next to Walker's Max Faith Furniture burned down. We've had some And it's amazing because they've been able to contain them, that the buildings survive around them. And they're all well built. Probably the biggest thing that I haven't mentioned that is no longer is what used to be at the foot of our street. The shipyards are gone. And I had a very interesting discussion not too long ago with a lady who was in carrying one of the flyers for their new development. And we were chatting about different things, and she said, "Can I ask you a question? Have you been around for a while?" And I said, "Yeah, a little while." And her question was, "They call it the shipyards." I said, "Yes." "Well, why did they pick that name?" I said, "Well, believe it or not, Canadian Steamship Lines operated here for over 100 years and built major lake freighters and did a lot during the war effort to build and or retrofit boats, worked for the Coast Guards, we had a dry dock." She stood there and went, "Huh, people cannot visualize." So if you look up here, you can see that's actually a wonderful aerial photograph that shows you a working shipyard. And that's what was at the foot of what I call the foot of our street. Hurontario emanates out from that, and I mean, we grew up knowing the boiler shop, the machine shop, the men who rode their bikes up and down. You can see a beautiful mural on the side of what is now the medical center, of the men riding their bikes. And I happen to live in the downtown core, and I can tell you those bikes used to be able to go from the shipyards, I think it was to 9th Street, straight before they hit a stop sign. And they could get ahead of steam up because most of them had a half an hour, most 45 minutes to go home, eat, and come back. The 12 o'clock whistle, and away they went. So all those sorts of things that used to be a part of our community have changed. So our main street is an interesting place. But when I think of what used to be on our street, I mean, I love Potts Dairy. They made the best milkshakes. They really, really did. Or floats, whatever you wanted. Little pastry shop had the best bread. You could get it fresh out of the oven. And his honey dip donuts were to die for. And he made them. Every morning he was in there, and that was Mr. Lanairs. So we knew all these people as we were growing up and going up and down the street. So it's an interesting community. Stuart Ellis Pharmacy actually had a Stuart Ellis, for those who don't know. It's interesting when people who are new to our community start wondering why things are named the way they are. You often hear it asked, why is this street named that way? But I'm starting to get asked about businesses, because often we had businesses that were named after people, or they had great names, but the same owner had them for years. Mr. Nettleton was the jeweler. Mr. Churchley was the jeweler. We had many more drugstores on our main street. We had Win Hammond, we had Chapman's, and Stuart Ellis in my lifetime. I'm sure there's probably another one or two in there. But it's amazing, those were all on the main street. And so our main street has changed, it's evolved, it's also, I'm forgetting a very well-known local name, Greco's. Greco's China, Greco's Shoes. As I called them, Mama and Papa Greco. They ran the China shop, and their little son, Sal, started a shoe shop. Sal's now selling advertising, no longer shoes. And he sometimes works, I think, at Home Depot. He's kind of an enterprising guy, still wants to work. So it's an interesting community to look at. I was born into a community of 7,000 people. They now say we're about 22,000. We haven't grown that much. We've grown. We've tripled in size in 59 years, which isn't as dramatic as some cities have or some towns have. But I'm amazed at the number of people who have moved up, moved into town, and then want all the progress to stop. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I think my dad was a little bit avant-garde coming up in the mid-50s and getting away from the big city, but everybody's still doing it. And we've gone from being an industrial manufacturing town to being a retail/tourism town. And I think it's very much reflected in the nature of our main street. in the type of businesses that are there. There's a lot of activity in the demands on time, what the hours are. As I said, everybody used to be closed on a Sunday. It's a rare business that is closed on a Sunday now. You know something, there's nothing wrong. I happen to be one of those businesses. I'm closed on Sundays. And when people ask you, they go, oh, well, I'll come in on Saturday, or I'll come in on Monday. So it's interesting, there's an accommodation to the way we run our retail businesses. I don't envy some of the businesses that are open 9 to 9. That's a long stretch, that's a lot of staffing, because one person can't work for 12 hours. But we still have a lot of independent retailers on the main street. We've got some things coming back, like Mad Dog's. It's a coffee shop and they sell records, new and used. If I told you we had record stores, would you have said we have record stores? It's interesting. Bert Bryden, yeah. Bob Madigan, in another iteration before Mad Dog's, had 91 discs down in the first block. But it's interesting. The one thing that we have developed more of, there were businesses on the main street like the odd real estate broker. They've all sort of moved out, except right next door to me, the Church of the Nazarene. The main floor is about to become another real estate company moving in there. So sort of, it's interesting to see the cycles of what happened. People think, oh, there were lots of people downtown. We'll move there. It's fascinating because a lot of people have started on the main street, gone out to Cranberry Mews, some have come back, some have started at the mountain, come into town. So there's far more of a movement of businesses now. Very few own their own building anymore. Lucky business owners do, but rents on the main street can be considered astronomical by any standards. I had a friend who looked around for office space downtown, and he said, I can do better at Yonge and Bay in Toronto. But we have a lot more. We used to have some families that owned a lot of owned a lot of the main street, the Grecos, the Johnsons. Johnsons still do, the Grecos are pretty much out of the real estate business. But it's interesting to see, we now have a lot of absentee, what I call absentee landlords. They do not live here, they might come up on weekends. If it's rented, it's rented, if it's not, it's not. So, but we still have enough people who want to come to town, open their businesses, give it a shot. It's quite interesting. So I think what I'd like to do now, I'll try my best not to do in the machine, Zoran. Thank you for setting it up for me. I'm going to move away from this one. I'm going to turn on this mic. Once I remember where this is. Ooh, yep, there I am. Doing in the microphone. Oh, I'm going to hold on to it because I've already knocked it off its stay. So what I would like to do is back up a bit here. Yeah. Okay, I think that's, okay. Let's start with me. So the top picture is the building that we are now still in, 47, almost 48 years later. And next door to us, the top picture is when the Church of the Nazarene was still there. The bottom picture is when the Hen and Chickens bought it, cut in the windows, the steps up, and painted her brown. Which is something a lot of the historical societies and things don't like anymore. Don't paint your brick. So this one, do we know where this one is? Not you. You two can't do that. I'll give you a hint. Did anybody ever go into a store called Passionate Kisses? Two? Okay. It's on Huron Street, so it's across from what used to be the old shipyard. It also became the Casbah. Okay. And right beside it is what has been a variety of different hairdressers. Well, that's the other thing we have a lot of on Main Street are hairdressers. This is the other end. I tried to figure out, I spent a lot of time playing with, Kathy gave me a lot of photos on a stick, and I was trying to find a representation, and I thought, can I work my way down the street? And I'm just gonna bounce around. So this is actually when they were raising the flag in a ceremony at what was then the high school, and across the road was Girdwood's. So the high school was on Hume in Hurontario, and what's across the street from it now? Trax Employment, and your Jim Wilson's office, your MPP's office. And it was the high school, that's right. Now it's a hole in the ground. Okay, this is a great building. This one isn't on the main street, but it was called the old Livery. It's on Simcoe. It was the Brewers Retail. It's now where the library is. But this was the best place in the world. This is what my dad called the In-N-Out store. If you think of going into the beer store now, it's pretty, it's glossy, it's flashy, it's got all sorts of signage. Literally, you walked in one door, you walked up to the counter, they went in the back, you placed your order, they went into the cooler, they got the beer, they brought it out, and then, I'll back up, you went out the other door. You had to go around and you went out. So it became known as the In-N-Out store. Very, very basic. But it served its purpose. It's amazing how things have changed going forward. Now, this is the Regent Theatre. Guess what? It's about to come down. This is what we now call the bingo hall. That has been abandoned for quite a while. It was the operational theatre, and you notice immediately to the left of it, you can just see Commerce. That's the Bank of Commerce. It's now part of the laneway through. That building came down and they built the new Bank of Commerce. You know, the bigger and better thing, the modernization. And a little bit of trivia, our inside front doors at our building came from the Bank of Commerce. My dad had what I called a door fetish. And this happened a lot, like Mr. Rule's front veranda ended up somewhere else. My dad bought doors at auctions. So he went down and bought the doors. Now, if we come back to the Regent Theatre, doesn't that look like fun? You walked in and there's the candy counter, making popcorn. Simple, simple, simple. Now, anybody know where this is? Red Inn, very good. So we're standing at the back of the restaurant looking forward. This was the old interior. I think that's the first place I ever had a real cup of coffee in a cup and saucer. And we called it the Little Dead Wren. Now we're up in what I call my third block. And the Esso station, this is part, I believe, of one of the town's centennial parade, so 1958. The Esso station later became known as Sheffers. And the ambulance service, McKechnie's ambulance service was also located there. Immediately to the big building to the right is what is now known as the Dorchester, or was known as the Dorchester. Had a few other names too. It had a ladies' entrance. That was one of the fun things. Now this is immediately opposite that section. So Potts Dairy is there. You can see the architecture is pretty much the same. We had a lot of majorettes in town when I was growing up. It was a big thing. Marching bands and majorettes. Now this is an interesting one. Mr. Saunders had a full file called Collingwood Fires. This just happened to be one down at the shipyards, and I thought I would pull it out and show it to you because it shows what it took if a fire broke out on one of the ships. If they ran into a problem and they needed to do work. Manpower was extremely important. Now, this is one of our great fires. This is the Max Faith fire. Walker's Stores was a wonderful small town department store. You walked in, basically ladies wear one side, men's wear the other side, home stuff at the back, but you could go there and get almost anything you needed. I got my first foundation garment at Walker's. I think I also got my first pantyhose at Walker's, when all of a sudden I said. But beside it is what is now what do we call it? The Loblaws parking lot. Okay, so there literally, it became, that's in between there, we did a few things with it, but it's interesting. So here was the one we began with, which was the aerial shot, and I'll come back to that at the end, because if you really, really look at it, it's fun. I love computers. Computers and iPhones where you can do this and make things bigger. If you look, you can see where the trains were coming in, but, no, somebody gave me a pointer too. Hold on for a sec. Oops, that's not it. I have too many pockets. Okay, it's got to be in the last one. There it is. There's the laser pointer. I would say take a look right up here. When I was a kid, those were called the Apple storage shed area. The trains used to come along there, and there was a lot of Apple storage that happened up there and south of what I still call 3rd Street, but Hurontario Street. So it's interesting to see working shipyard, major freighters, but this is the main street of Collingwood. Here she goes, right up there. And she still looks, probably if we flew over and found George Zerny and got one of his aerial shots today, you would still see that same sort of configuration. But what we no longer have on our main street is a working industry. We no longer have the machine shop. We no longer have the boiler room. All of which were major employers for the community. So, Smart's Cannery, yes. Here's another one, basically where today, well, you can see we no longer have the PUC downtown anymore. We no longer really have a PUC either. It's called Collis Power Stream. But their offices were there. And so basically we're looking where Soul Kitchen is now. So you see, and the thing is, when you walk downtown, look up. The tops of the buildings have not changed that much. They're still there. There's some interesting stuff. Has everybody found the swastika on the main street? It's in the first block. Now here's a building that hasn't changed a lot. And here's a building that's up for sale. So the Days Body Works, you can see from the age of the cars. And look at all those power poles, wow, it's quite something. But again, that building has not changed much. The only thing that's gone is what's now their parking lot, the building that was beside it. So it's up for sale, folks. It could turn in, I've heard everything from a microbrewery to being torn down and turned into another parking lot. So who knows where it'll go. But it's interesting. Now this is to give you an idea. When my dad bought a building, this was the main floor. So we walked around and drew chalk on the floor and said, okay, we'll put units here, here, and here. And that's my dad standing in the pulpit, which came with the church. And the gentleman standing with him is, I have to say this carefully, Bill Brown, senior. Okay. So there is a Bill Brown. I knew Bill Brown Jr. He was Mr. Brown to me, but Dad worked with Bill Brown Sr. And then there's another Bill Brown. And Bill Browns are still, they used to be located in town. They're now out in the mountain road. So that's what our building looked like when we bought it inside. Actually, both floors basically were just wide open. So I'm backing up now to the Ditson Bakery. This is how they delivered their goods around town. Now, taking into account our building was built in the early 1900s, that's what our building looked like when it was built. A very dear friend of mine, yeah, I just heard from the back of the room, 1912. Very dear friend of mine who is no longer alive, a fellow retailer, Murray Clerkson, always used to look at my building and he'd look at these pictures every once in a while and he'd say, doesn't matter, it still looks like a prison to me. We have a great big rectangular building. But I mean, I love this. Eat Ditson's breads and cakes. I love it. I just love it. And then this was a picture which came from the museum when we were participating in something called Doors Open several years ago. And I did it in particular, you can see behind the boat is our building, but to the right is what became the Church of the Nazarene, but that is not the way it was built. This is its original structure, then it was flattened out, and then when the next people came along, they cut new holes in it, and it's just interesting to see what happens to the architecture as we go through. Now this is another part of the Centennial Parade, which I think we need to bring more parades back in Collingwood. I love it. I really, really love it. But if you look here, we have the Bell Canada building, which is the lawyer's office. We have the little dead wren beside it. We have the original Temple building, which did suffer a fire and was rebuilt. But you start going down and you sort of look at the buildings and you think, okay, here we go. Now, this is what's now known as Huron Street. So this is Hurontario looking east. And you can see there's Passionate Kisses too. There's what's now a hair salon again, and the shipyards, or I loved it, the shipyards medical center. Shortly after they opened on the back of their building, they put up really fancy letters, and I drove down to Sobeys one night, and it was called the Hip Yards. The S had fallen off. Took them a while to get the S back up, but it was interesting. So I thought after a while, maybe I should just leave it calling it the Hip Yards. So this is another series that Mr. Saunders took, and we're sort of up on top, basically, of the Gaiety Theatre building. Mm-hmm.
Penny, your last slide, what was across the street from you?
That's the shipyards. So that is the machine shop. The boiler shop was right on one in and a little further down, but and then if you went a little further, the next, get me pointer here, so that's the machine shop, and then there were offices. And I mean, other than that, nothing has changed in your way in and out of the yard. Hurontario's been extended, you can go out and around. So, but it was to me, a big loss, because it really changed the landscape. So here we are, there's the temple, it was there, but this is the fun time when you can get up on top of buildings and take pictures. It's quite interesting. Now this is going to the other end of the street, and I'd like you to notice a few things. On the left, we have a hardware store. On the right, we had, right at the corner of Hurontario and First, we had Lockhart Motors. Then we had Loblaws, as you headed south. Then this building is actually Max Faith Furniture, which burned down. Foley's was there at one point, Walker's. And if you notice on the left, there was Crest Hardware. So we had hardware stores, we had all sorts of things downtown that aren't downtown anymore. Now we're back up on top in the first block, and you can see Max Faith on the left. That was a snazzy furniture store. Mr. Faith even worked there. It wasn't just named Max Faith the way some things are done today. But you can see that there's a big empty lot.
There was a park.
There was a park. And then, sorry, right at the end is Lockhart Motors. Bulls first, you're right. Sorry. Yeah. And there are lovely white elevators in the background, back when they were lovely and white. Excuse me. So it's amazing how the town has changed, how the main street has changed, yet it hasn't changed. So now if I come south a block, the corner was the drugstore, which was Hammond's. We used to shorten it up and just call it Hammond's on the end. Gyrene Hammond was the pharmacist when I was growing up, and George Foster wrapped all the Laura Secord chocolates. And he had the most precise way of wrapping up the papers and doing things. And then there was Trot's. Trot's is a very big building. And our latest retail casualty is in the Trot's building. The Zumba has just closed. Rumba. Who knows what that will become. We're on to a new, and if you look across the street, we've got a menswear shop. Our wonderful days of parallel parking are still here, or angle parking, sorry. But if you look, I think I've got another one. Okay, that takes us into the next block. This is an interesting one because it shows you the Trots, the Regent Theatre, Bank of Commerce coming up. Anybody know what that building was? Yeah. Yeah. Look when we could put horses going down the main street. Isn't that fun? I want parades to come back. I really, really do.
I was in a parade with horses on the main street.
Were you? Okay. Okay, this takes us to the next corner that now has changed a bit. You can see Dominion Store, so I'm back in the first block again, but look at the tops of these buildings. These buildings have changed dramatically. If you go up here, the brickwork. This building now has the mural along the side. In my lifetime, it's been that, and you notice next door was Mally's. Then Mally's moved over and ran the bus station and the magazine shop and the lunch counter. Then look beside that, there was an Eaton's catalog office. There aren't even any Eaton's left anywhere. Dominion in one of its iterations before it moved up to the fourth block, and on it goes. So these are wonderful snapshots that we have of our community, and I think people who take the time to take photos, I went through a lot of my dads, and a lot of my dads were people, not buildings. But Mr. Saunders really took his time to document our community. Now this is an interesting building. In my lifetime, that was the bowling alley. When we zoom in on the writing on the top of the building, it says Lockhart Motors, and it's for lease. So he'd moved. But the building beside it is what I knew as the Dorchester growing up. It had Julian Ferguson in it on one side, and the other side had, I'm trying to remember. Can't see it in this light. Was it the taxi? Russ Campbell's. Okay, so that was one of his locations. But look at the beautiful brickwork and the windows on that building. Yeah, what was Lockhart's became Elaine Dickinson's, was a bowling alley, became Elaine Dickinson's. I'm trying to remember what came after that. But it's interesting, and then to this side to the south of Julian Ferguson and Company was the Esso station. So in there. But I look at this and I look at how they've done the stucco on this building now with the pebbles and stones, and it kind of makes me want to cry. Because some of these buildings were gorgeous. So here is a busy, busy main street, and there's the Regent Theatre. So lined up and ready to go in. So now I'm back to my building up at 4th Street. You can see Lyons Cleaners in the top picture. And the other thing that's interesting is Lyons had great big neon hanging signs that hung out over the sidewalk, and a lot of businesses had those. And when the street was dug up, they decided that there would be nothing that goes across the street, nothing that would hang over the sidewalk. They're kind of creeping back now. There are some businesses that just have little tiny ones that sort of come out from the building about, I don't know, 15 or 18 inches. But they're attached. They don't swing. They don't have lights in them. There were some storms that you'd look at those things and wonder how they would make it. But it's an interesting main street that we have. It will continue to change. It will be interesting to see what happens next, or what might come down, or, God forbid, the next great fire. Because there's still a lot of wonky wiring on the main street. There are a lot of old buildings and a lot of absentee owners. I do know that the recently retired Fire Chief Trent Elliott did work hard to try and incorporate and get everybody to upgrade and put in a lot of safety measures, but human nature, I'm sure we're not done with the fires yet. Anyway, that's about where I am. That's sort of what my main street has been like in my lifetime and in my business lifetime. I'd take any questions, but I'd also encourage everybody to come up. Kathy brought some great There's also a great binder there that has a lot of pictures in it, just to remind you, because it's quite interesting as we go through. I'll go back to the other one so I'm not spitting in the microphone anymore. Any questions? Yes?
Can you comment on the arena?
Well, it used to be an opera house, not in my lifetime. The opera house burned down and the arena, built in 49. It was built with a lot of steel from the shipyards, and the actual arena design was basically done like the hull of a ship. It's going to be interesting to see when you talk about social media. I don't know how many people here might have participated in trying to get us to #1 in craft hockey bill. Yes. But we have $25,000 coming, which we can put into improvements there. So that's well worth, I am not a robot, 25,000 times. I would love to hear eventually how many people actually voted in the various places, but we do. O'Leary PEI reached out to Collingwood after they were chosen for the East Division, and a few people in Collingwood got going on social media trying to say support the East, support O'Leary, and they got it. So social media works, it gets information out, but we are, as one of the 10 finalists, we are receiving $25,000. The arena is another wonderful anchor in the downtown. It brings people down, and they do other things. Like the nicest thing, I'm kind of what you call a Jane Jacobs person. I want a mixed community in my downtown. I don't mind churches, I love banks. I like having an arena downtown. I love being able to buy my food, buy my coffee. I don't have to go through a drive-through for everything. And that's a big thing today in so many areas as they're planning. It's a building and a lot of parking or a drive-through. And we need to get out and walk. We need to be healthier. We need to plow our sidewalks well in order for our 4 seasons. But the arena is a great anchor because it also brings the kids downtown, and there's a vibrancy to it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. The old Regent Theatre has its demolition permit. Regent Theatre, CKCB, BB, Bingo Hall, coming down. They've already started taking the stuff out inside. Apparently it's also full of mold. So it'll be interesting to see, but the rumors I've heard is it's going to be a 3-story period brick building, presumably with retail on the main floor and perhaps living above or offices above, one or the other. So,
I heard in the shipyard and maybe railway years, there used to be a number of pubs and hotels.
there were. Oh, that was another fire we had, the Arlington.
Yeah.
We now have the Arlington Shops, but we used to have an Arlington Hotel. I had my first legal drink when I turned 18 in the Arlington. Living in the downtown core, I was way ahead of drinking and driving. I just walk everywhere. So the Arlington was literally in the same spot. We lost the Arlington, and we lost what was then known as the Canada Trust, which is now, was rebuilt and then eventually sold to the town, and it's got the Economic Development Center in it now. So
Tops attached.
Tops was attached.
It went first, didn't it?
That's right, yes. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the one thing we've had on our main street, almost from the beginning, is what I call our federal building. Had federal offices, had the post office. She's beautiful, but she's getting to the point where she's gonna need help soon too. She's not as white as she used to be. I don't know if that's environment or what we're doing around her, but she needs some help to be maintained. And I know the Historical Society have done a great small book on it, and I would encourage everyone to shop and buy one. It's only $5. Yeah.
How many years ago was used to be the post office, you called it another building?
The federal building?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
When was it built?
1914, I believe.
Not before
I don't think so, and it's modeled on one in Havana. There's kind of a sister. It's sort of like the All Saints Anglican Rectory, what used to be the Anglican Rectory. There is another small home exactly like that, very similar in outside of Creemore called Claverley. It's kind of interesting how patterns were chosen. I mean, just before the meeting, we were talking about different things in houses, and I said the Collingwood I grew up in did not have any subdivisions. We now have subdivisions abound that I don't even recognize by names where some of them are. But it's kind of interesting, and then we have some independent builders like, you know, a Norm Bar House when you see it. It's either that bluey gray or it's beige. And it's sort of one style and it appears in different places. But the other interesting thing, not only in Collingwood, well, in Collingwood, is that a lot of homes are now being purchased and either totally gutted and rebuilt in modern ways or leveled as a building lot. So we have an interesting community that we live in. We're still evolving. The one thing I love is our main street still looks like our main street. We have some modern buildings on it. Who knows, in the next 50 years, they may come down and they'll put up something else that's retro. It's an interesting community, and it's all sort of at the will of how people develop things, but it's an interesting town, and I think we're all extremely fortunate to live here.
Did you
Mrs.
know-
Chrysler.
Did you know that the Regent Theatre was the first place that Bull's Garage was? And my mother was a bookkeeper there.
Oh,
So was my mother working.
Okay.
She
Yes.
We
Yes.
got Ernie Bull.
Ernie Bull,
I
okay.
have a picture of them in
Okay.
the car.
All
Ernie
right.
and my mother.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, Penny.
Hi.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Opera House.
Yes,
Way back in 1800s,
yes.
the Collingwood Collegiate student body and all the teachers were down in the Opera House when the high school started on fire and burnt to the ground. And a whole bunch of people ran back to the fire, and one person threw a teacher's desk out through the window. And we actually have that burnt leg in the archive of the Collingwood Collegiate.
Somehow, Mr. Sproul, that doesn't surprise me. Yes, Mr. Bevan, let's go to you.
We bought a Regency bungalow on Minnesota Street
Mhm.
15 years ago, did some renovations. You mentioned pot stereo. I found one of the old cardboard milk bottle caps with a little pull tab on it.
Yeah.
Pot stereo phone 46, 2 digits.
Yeah. As I said, what is now, well, it used to be Bob Thompson's office, is the Bell Telephone Building. And that's where everybody used to plug in all those bits and bobs, and you had the neat phone numbers. So, Kathy.
I just think, Penny, it's a good thing to mention that downtown is protected under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Yes, yes. We are one of the very few small towns that have a heritage district, and we have an active committee working to maintain the integrity of the downtown. When I facetiously say things like don't paint brick, they're working to restore, because if you look at, remember some of the original buildings that we were seeing from the 50s in some of those photographs, no paint on them, they were brick. So, yes.
What about the wartime houses that are built out there with their 24-inch studding spacing and proper insulation with no overhang? What's going to become of them?
Well, the last wartime I saw that was purchased and tarted up and sold went for $500,000. Which is just amazing, because I'm not sure you can buy a starter home in Collingwood anymore. You can't buy a starter building on the main street anymore.
How come there isn't these so-called building assessors that, you know, the private ones, not make that aware of these people and know what they're buying?
I think the one thing that we have are major rules and regulations, and somehow we have trouble catching up, and we have X amount of staff. And a lot are working to their capacity, and there are challenges for all town staff in trying to keep up with all the rules and regs and catching up. I mean, the older buildings on the main street I think it's amazing between today's technology for the fires that we've had, that they've been able to contain them and the other buildings and their integrity have held. So our Main Street is in pretty good shape. It's got some challenges, but it's in good shape. David?
Maybe we were encouraged to paint our buildings in, about 1970.
That's a different trend now.
That was, called the Railroad
Yeah.
Sheet Plan, it was a
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes?
I think we all owe the Lexes a vote of thanks for all the work they've done in helping us keep the good looks of our downtown and restore this little building back.
Yeah, Richard and Uncle Lex have not only embraced the whole historical restoration aspect, but they've kind of extended, done that wonderful thing we always want to do with our Main Street. They've taken us down Simcoe Street. We have wonderful side streets, we have wonderful buildings. And we got a few pubs their way too. So they have invested heavily in their community. One last question, back of the room.
Way back, we moved up in '83, so we were just
Mhm.
sort of on the verge of things changing. Seems, this is a two-part question. Seems to me that there was a Woolworths.
Yes, Woolers. Woolers. Yep. That's down where the building that's, I forget the name of it, but where the liquor store is now. That building was Woolworths. And when Woolworths was built, it had the very first escalator in Collingwood. And that was a big thing, yes, yeah. And we also had, I mean, we had other little department stores, but that was our first two-story department store.
Stedman's 5 and 10.
Stedman's 5 and 10, Canadian Tire was on the Main Street.
Home Hardware.
Home Hardware, yeah, Home Hardware was another part of the Arlington fire. And I can remember standing beside Mr. Alan Sinclair as he was standing there practically, I would say crying paint, trying to figure out if the fire that was going towards his hardware store was gonna blow up all the paint that was inside. It was sort of like, where is it in the building? You could see his mind clicking along as he went. And it's now a lovely gym. It's called Northwoods. So, you said a two-part?
The other thing that I've often wondered as I'm walking down the street, and I'm down towards Shore, and, where the Terrace Restaurant was.
Used to be, yes.
What was originally there that had like a patio and the steps, and it looked like it was also a restaurant?
In my memory, I can tell you, I can't remember what it was built as, but it was purchased by a few business people and converted into sort of the idea of 3 shops. There was the one closest to us was a branch of the toy shop from Toronto. Latterly, it became an accountant's. It turned into office space, and then it was when they moved across into the Shepherd Court building, it was pretty much vacant until Old Town Terrace came along. And there's another one that's gone off the Main Street. Old Town Terrace closed. I hear a new restaurant's going in. Don't know what type of food we're gonna get there, but new restaurant. So I see Bruce standing, so I'm really good at knowing my time's up. So thank you very much.